All right, everybody. I have the great pleasure of being with Styxhexenhammer666, and we're going to discuss a very important topic today. Definitely, I put Styx's Patreon below to support my YouTube channel. The Patreon is below as well. Styx has been a very, very real powerful voice in terms of politics. Although we don't see eye to eye on political issues or a lot of political issues, we do find common ground on a lot of big topics. Styx's coverage of the 2016 election was by far superior to 538, CNN, the mainstream. He actually called Trump's victory in detail. And he provided a lot of analysis that you can't find elsewhere. He also provides analysis on a lot of different topics that you can't find elsewhere, including foreign policy. So even if you don't agree politically, it's a viewpoint that is not only very educated, but it's a viewpoint that even if you're on the left, a lot of times, especially in terms of anti-war and regime change, and especially in terms of this topic, censorship, we can all agree on. But Styx, first and foremost, I want to thank you for being on my channel.
Oh, it's a big pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
What do you think of what's taking place in terms of censorship in Google and YouTube specifically?
Well, on YouTube, I would say the idea of censoring the site as heavily as they're suggesting is a terrible mistake. I think we see how wide-reaching the worst censorship might be based on the Adpocalypse 2 sort of stuff going on now. I was looking at someone, I can't even remember where I saw them linked. It was like a bodybuilding channel, like weightlifting and stuff. No political content. Nothing about social movements of any kind. No religious banter. And everything there was demonetized. I saw someone else, it was like a gaming channel. They were demonetized. Now, I can't monitor my own content as far as how it would be impacted by anything AdSense related, because I don't use AdSense and I haven't. I don't know if you use AdSense at all. If not, you couldn't see that either. I think it's going to impact basically anyone who covers any topic in due time. Like people I see like on the left, or they proclaim themselves on the left. Some of them are chuckling about the censorship on Google, about Memogate or any of these things. I don't think they realize if they have views that are not in lockstep with neoliberalism, if they're a progressive, a socialist, whatever they happen to be outside of that main core of Democratic partisans, I think they're going to get censored too. And by then it'll be sort of like the first they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for the Catholics, and then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. I think that's the sort of situation that could erupt. Now, I see it passing in time as a moral panic, but it's just a matter of how long do we have to wait and all be abused beforehand.
I find it, like what you just stated right now, I find it very interesting that Counterpunch, which is a publication that I read, it's a publication way to the left. Counterpunch is now being censored by Google. And this was after the Washington Post falsely accused it of being a Russian propaganda tool. I say falsely accused because they were just put on a list by the Washington Post in the most egregious manner. And then Counterpunch, one of the editors, writes this hit piece on a writer that I find brilliant. Her name is Caitlin Johnstone, simply because he disagrees with her writing. And it's almost like the editor there was oblivious. Everything that Counterpunch experienced and is now continuing to experience, what he did was actually bolster that kind of mentality of censorship or that kind of narrow-mindedness by then trying to attack a colleague or fellow writer just because he disagrees with her. I just think that it's an issue beyond left and right. It's a human issue. What parallels do you see? I'm sure you've read Orwell's 1984. What parallels do you see between today in our world, our media with CNN, that kind of groupthink dominating the airwaves, and George Orwell's 1984?
I think it's a little bit more like Animal Farm, honestly. Maybe minus the total state control. Everything is coming from the legacy media as propaganda. And it doesn't matter. People have fallen into this weird false dichotomy where they correctly identify that Fox or Breitbart is propaganda, but they don't aim it at MSNBC or CNN or something. Or they correctly identify, yeah, CNN and MSNBC, that's like propaganda, but they talk about how great Tucker Carlson is or something like that. Or that other dude Bowling, I think his name is, who, you know, now he's got allegations against him. I think they kicked him out. And as long as people are sort of split apart into those supposedly warring camps, they're never going to get anything accomplished. They can be abused at a whim because you can never cobble together a large enough majority of the population to stand against it. They'll only stand against it if it's coming from the other so-called side, I guess. And that's, it's really more almost, again, as an Animal Farm comparison, as opposed to necessarily 1984. I mean, the sort of language used, the sort of newspeak terms that filter into our lexicon, that's very 1984-ish. So far, we don't have re-education camps or something like that. Thankfully, I wonder when Google will be making them for their rogue employees. So put them before a screen to brainwash them a little bit. They'll be marching slowly to and fro. But I think censorship, governments love to censor. The legacy media likes it because it dumbs down their competitors online, especially on different groups like this. They generally try to be less overt. That's why Google's made a big mistake. They were very, very forthcoming about the fact that they were going to begin suppressing content that they found offensive. What they didn't realize is that the paradigm socially in the country and in the West at large, I think, is breaking down. They assumed people would say, oh, they're going to ban Nazis and they're going to ban people who are on the far right. Oh, that's a good thing. We want that in society. They then realize there are a lot of people who actually don't, even if they're not part of those groups, they actually stand against it, including some voices on the left.
You know, I have a show every Monday with a really great friend of mine, Tim Black, and he's a tremendously powerful voice in progressive politics. And what we get a lot from the left is, oh, how come you're not being loyal to the Democratic Party? And how come you're not being loyal and you're criticizing? And why do you think, and I know that also takes place on the right as well. What is it about American culture today, or maybe it's always been this way, it probably always has. What is it, this kind of loyalty to groupthink? Why are people afraid of discussion, debate, and why are they so quick to align themselves with groupthink or following the herd?
Yeah, well, I think it's an innate human tendency to some degree. There's sort of this war within mankind's psychology between the very independent, solitary animal and the group. And this gets taken advantage of by these corporations, which is what they are, the RNC and the DNC. Even the Libertarian Party, which I support generally, other than Gary Johnson, who went nuts, it's a corporation. It's a for-profit entity. If they don't run a profit, they're going to have problems. They've got to get together with somebody who can fund them, which means they have to get kickbacks. Why else are they receiving that funding in the first place? No, private individuals might give them $10 because they're like, oh, I like this aspect of this person's message. You think, does anyone out there think that some massive bank really wants to spend $10-20 million forming a super PAC and get nothing in return? Oh, yeah, we totally funded this Democratic candidate because they promised to raise the tax rate by a measly 0.25% on one income tax bracket. We gave $100 million to this friggin' Republican because they promised that they were going to do away with this meaningless regulation that doesn't have anything to do with our business in the first place. I don't think so. It's all about kickbacks. It's like years ago in the wake of Bush. Bush was a terrible president. He was dumb, he was inept, he was corrupt, he mishandled 9/11, he mishandled Katrina, he mishandled basically everything. He couldn't even pronounce nuclear. In the wake of that, I voted for Obama in 2008. I said, okay, well, I'm going to be a Democrat now because the Republicans have lost their mind. They've all fallen in behind Bush. He's crazy. And I didn't believe in some of the loftiest rhetoric at the time of, well, we're going to have change and hope and everything will get better. But I figured, well, there's a possibility some of this gets accomplished. Obama comes in. He doubles down on domestic surveillance, drone war, corporatism. He's throwing taxpayer money at banks and automotive companies and pretending that it's necessary. He was exactly the same. And all of these people at the time that had been arguing against Iraq and against, all of these things, all of a sudden they had no problem with it because they weren't ideologically on the left. They weren't ideologically against government abuse. They were just Democratic partisans. They just switched party loyalty. It's not even ideology.
That is true. That's a great breakdown. I remember growing up, I think it was even before high school, there was a band called Two Live Crew. And I remember that one of their CDs was banned in like Broward County in Florida, in Miami. What do you think? And so then they did an album against censorship. And so it was one of my first introductions to censorship because of music. What do you think takes place? Because I know that, on YouTube, that might not reach the widest audience in terms of, YouTubers or people who speak about politics, really getting it in terms of censorship. What takes place in our country if you think that when people try to ban or censor music again? Because that was big in the 80s. And what happens, do you think, if music is the next foray into censorship again?
That would explode the whole paradigm. It's like if you look at the charts for all of like the post-Soviet sort of, they were behind the Iron Curtain nations like Eastern Europe. What are the popular bands? What are the popular movements? It's stuff from that same period that was banned because it became cool when it was banned. It's like Depeche Mode. Every time they could release a 5-minute loop of them just chuckling to themselves, it would go straight to #1 in Poland or Hungary or Bulgaria or even like Russia or someplace like that. What is suppressed, I think, becomes cool to people. What is forbidden and taboo is like, wow, it's exciting. There's a reason why it's banned in the first place. So unless you intend to bring fire and death down upon the suppressed group or ideology or song or whatever it is and totally wipe them off the face of the earth, you can't really actively suppress them. When YouTube comes out and says, we're going to get rid of this offensive content once and for all, but they're not actually planning to get rid of it. They're just planning to put it in a limited state. Are they trying to promulgate this material? You're going to have like indoctrination videos from militant groups. That is their express purpose in introducing this state, although it's really more about politics in general, I think. I think it doesn't take a genius to realize who they're actually trying to censor, the so-called fringe right and the so-called fringe left. When that happens, anything that's put into a limited state, it's only a matter of time before somebody builds a platform for political discourse, social discourse, music, whatever it is, to actually make it easier to spread that stuff around outside of Google's control. And once that happens, it'll all be viral. It'll be like a badge of honor, like people consider it. Being banned on Twitter is considered a badge of honor. Oh, I was edgy enough to get banned on this site that's kind of ban happy. And they sort of wear it with pride. And then they make another account anyway, and they just ramble about it until they get banned again.
There's a lot more to your channel than just politics. In terms of other topics that you speak about, I don't know if you want to describe a little bit of it here or now, but in terms of other topics that you speak about, have you experienced censorship in other mediums, or have you experienced pressure from YouTube to kind of say, hey, Styx, you can talk about politics, but definitely not, the other things that you talk about?
No, the political discourse, as far as YouTube is concerned, is the only stuff that would really be suppressed. But I mean, during the brief period where I had AdSense enabled, I didn't have anything monetized, but I was enabled for AdSense. The number of videos pre-adpocalypse that would have been able to be monetized was scant. It was like maybe a third of them at best. almost all that wouldn't have been, that was the political discourse. Like the occult stuff, nobody has a problem with that. But I can remember a time, and this is what concerns me here. Censorship can come from the right too. I can remember a decade ago when I would discuss something, you know, on Facebook at the time, we were talking 2007, 2008, related to sorcery or witchcraft or my aversion to organized religion. Attempts at the time were in vogue towards the end of the W administration to try to suppress that content. I got on board with gay marriage very early. At the time, it was still very, very unpopular to be in favor of gay marriage. This was before the Democrats took it up as a major issue. And so there were definitely people who, their first line was, well, you support gay marriage, so you must yourself be gay. You must be like a devil worshiper or something akin to it. Of course, I was still a Christian at the time. Or you must be a communist, or you're just delusional or something. And they would try to shut down any discourse on that because they feared it. They realized that that discourse in time, as long as it was held, would win over. I think that's what these tech firms are worried about now. They want to shut down reasonable debate because they're afraid that the people who lose, it'll be like in the Netherlands with their center left collapsing, or any of these other countries. You've got people on the fringes of political movements. They're the ones getting all the support. You look at Austria, who was everyone voting for? Someone who's communist light, Van der Bellen, I think his name was, or someone who is the leader of a former Teutonic party with Hofer. Where's the center? Where's the centrist movement? Where's the kind of conservative movement? Where are the corporatist liberals? They're nowhere to be found. And they're terrified, I think, of that, because they realize if you go far left or far right, they lose the censorship, legacy media implodes, alt media is going to be like, well, at least now we have choices. There's an actual left, there's an actual right. It's not this sort of boring stuff we've been muddling through. Trump and Sanders, honestly, and people like that, Rand as well, are exciting. People like Clinton or a Marco Rubio, they're not exciting. We've already heard everything they could possibly say we've been hearing for 30, 40 years. Who cares?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of, like, I find it fascinating what you just said right now, in terms of you were a Christian and then you became more into, you said, the occult.
No, first, sort of, I was a Christian, like just a general, like, liberal Christian, and no strong religious beliefs, just like, oh yeah, I worship God. And then I became briefly more of a religious Christian, and during that period of time, I realized, well, what the hell am I doing, basically, and became just an atheist because I didn't have that strong. I was doing it mainly for religious purposes, not because I had, you know, visions of the Holy Spirit or something. And then I migrated through atheism towards atheistic Satanism for a while. Then I realized, well, that's pretty vacuous, and I embraced the occult. I realized that I had paranormal experiences, and I started studying it more. I'm like, oh, well, this works for me. I don't need to limit myself to one dogma. I can study all the dogmas and have a general appreciation of all human spirituality, and I think it's a good thing in my life.
And I know that for the simple-minded people who literally listen to something or might watch this, and then they won't get what you just said, because what you just said is a lot more complex than the detractors might believe. If somebody were to watch this and say, aha, because this is part of censorship to me. It's trying to label people and marginalize them with a label that either doesn't exist or doesn't apply to the person.
Yeah.
If somebody, of course, a simple-minded moron just stumbled upon this discussion and then said, aha, H.A. Goodman is speaking to a person who loves Satan. It's all coming together now. We knew H.A. was weird, but now he's a Satan worshiper, just like Styx.
He's the Illuminati.
Yeah. What would you say to somebody who either wanted to marginalize your viewpoint or try to label you as Satan worshiper because they don't understand what you just said?
Yeah, I would tell them generally to go back a couple years in my video uploads, and they'll see that the Satanism stuff was a long time ago, and since then I've migrated completely out of it. In fact, I've attacked the Church of Satan several times because they don't really do anything. They're no longer socially relevant. And they're an atheistic order. They don't even believe in Satan. They're not like a group of people who cut a cat's head off and spin the Iron Maiden record backwards, say, oh yeah, Satan's talking to... Yeah, or Black Sabbath or something. Yeah, people have to, it's easier to criticize someone if you try to fit them into a category. When somebody doesn't really have, any significant connection to them and rejects them all, makes it really hard to combat the things. It's like people on the right, part of the new right in general, the general big tent of the right that's rising up now in a tech fashion. A lot of these people, they try to centralize their little organizations and use labels like, oh, we are the alt-right and we're an acolyte of insert person here. We are the alt-right acolyte of this person here. They're actually weakening themselves. They leave themselves very vulnerable. When it was much more vacuous and it was just it was all chaos and they were all posting frog memes, it was impossible to combat that. It's impossible because there's no single definition under which people fit. You can't attack something that's that fluid. People who believe simply in liberty should just say, hey, we believe in liberty, we're anti-censorship, and sort of go past all those labels when they're doing so. Because you could have someone, they're a card-carrying, ultimately a communist, and they're agreeing with somebody on the alt-right fundamentally, at least on that issue. If it's issue-driven, it becomes harder to combat. The legacy media, therefore, and legacy, the establishment politicians, they hate that. They don't want to talk about ideas and ideology. They want to talk about labels and categories, because then it's very, very easy to split people apart, I think.
I think you're right. And, the interesting thing about censorship and being offended by things is that, well, where does it end? Because now with politics and these vapid lines, you can say, well, that's offensive. That's, that's speech that offends me. But then if a person who has a religion says, well, I can't make a wedding cake for two gay people who are getting married, that's offensive to me. Well, no, wait a second. Now that's entering the realm of, civil rights, or a legal boundary you can't break. What I'm saying is what takes place when censorship moves towards other issues aside from politics, like religion or cultural issues. Then you get into a realm where it's a free-for-all, where people just say, well, no, that's offensive to me because of my religion. That's offensive to me because of my culture. That's offensive to me because I simply don't like it. And then you get everybody offended all the time and everybody calling for censorship. Do you think that this Google, YouTube censorship situation could lead to, well, I guess, where do you think it could lead to in terms of unforeseen consequences?
Yeah, well, it's more than just Google and YouTube. I mean, Facebook, Twitter, they all basically do the same. The best case scenario is that they overstretch and it looks like they're on the eve of doing so. And a lot of sites that are their competitors and stand for total freedom, stuff like Patreon, Gab, Minds, rising up now, begin to grow much more rapidly. Now, on those sites, that's not going to become a problem. Those competitors are angling themselves into a position to make a huge amount of money, by the way, too. And part of it is profit motive. They realize, hey, when censorship falls out of favor because it goes a bridge too far, we're going to have so many users. People are going to be, we're going to make money hand over fist as long as we're marginally reasonable in how we're running our site. It's going to be great. They want the money primarily, but they're still serving a good service. The worst case scenario is that it becomes accepted by the culture to have that level of censorship. And then the fallout from what would otherwise be a short-lived, moral panic, it fizzles out over time. You go back to what would be more of a long-term norm, which is marginal respect for liberty, becomes more entrenched, and then it requires decades of effort to fight off. If that happens, it's going to strangulate so many entrepreneurs, so many people that would make such a positive impact in the world. I would simply ask people this: which is closer to actually being violent? Somebody simply being offensive or insensitive in their words, or somebody attempting to blacklist that person, prevent them from ever getting a job, disclose their identity, dox them, essentially get them maybe beaten up, get them harassed, people are coming to their house screaming in their windows? Which one of those is closer to violence? I say the latter. I think that's fairly clear. There are actually people who are delusional enough to think that simply saying, even if you don't mean it, it's just, you know, you were temporarily insensitive, you made a bad joke. They think that's worse than actions. They think words are more violent than actions. I guess they take the concept of the pen being mightier than the sword, or the keyboard maybe nowadays, a little bit too literally, honestly. They don't want to have to debate anything, so they just try to shut people who they disagree with up, and they make up as an excuse that they're offended. I don't think that a lot of these cases really involve them being legitimately offended. I think that they're just whining. I think that they're using that as an excuse for censorship because they don't want to debate the point. They know inside they're wrong. They know that nobody will take them seriously because of their rhetoric, so they just try to shut up the people they disagree with. Oh, they're a Nazi. They're a bigot, a fascist, or something.
Why do you think that there's this disconnect? And you stated it, you know, extremely accurately. The disconnect between real violence and words. I noticed that if somebody on Twitter writes something offensive, their life is ruined. But more attention is paid to that than, let's say, and this has taken place during Bush and Obama's tenure, and it's also taking place during Trump's tenure, when we accidentally, quote unquote, accidentally bomb a hospital in Afghanistan and kill 40 people, or quote unquote, accidentally bomb 60 civilians in Syria. In terms of true bloodshed, carnage, horror, we as a society seem to be okay with that, or not worried about really delving into it. But the offensive word is, you know, just something we need to focus on. Yeah, why does that disconnect exist in American society?
Well, I think it's because it's out of sight, out of mind. The fact that we live in a more safe, developed, stable society means that if people are getting droned over there in Yemen or Pakistan or Afghanistan or something, the average person, even people who are generally, they're more on the pacifistic side, they're not really pro-war, they just ignore it. Oh, 50,000, 60,000 people got droned by Obama? That's okay. I never saw any of these people get splattered on my street. At the same time, they're worried that a small group of white identitarians or any other group of people is going to suddenly rise up. You know, for months they said, oh, well, it's just a couple of neckbeards. We don't have to worry about that. They see a few hundred people marching. Oh, no, the sky is falling. Meanwhile, they want to ignore the problems that go on in the rest of the world, largely as the result of failed U.S. foreign policy. And this is where I have more of an overlap with the left. I don't want to see Yemenis screwed over. I don't want to see Pakistanis screwed over, Syrians, Libyans. I think we should leave all these people the hell alone to live their lives. But there are plenty of people who, they don't care how much they get screwed over, so long as people here toe the line and don't say the wrong thing. Now, I was under the impression that the First Amendment was explicitly created in the first place for forms of speech that might be otherwise banned or censored. What's the difference? I would even ask this of self-proclaimed libertarians, because often they come at me when I argue against like corporate censorship. They say, well, it's a private firm, it's not a government, so Bill of Rights doesn't apply. What's the difference? What's the difference in impact and effect between the government blacklisting you and ruining your life and a company doing the same thing, or a group of people who get offended at some joke you made? Maybe they took it way out of context. All of a sudden, oh yeah, you lost your job. Now you've got people throwing rocks at your house and keying in your car and slashing your tires. But that's okay because it wasn't a government that did it. What's the difference? It doesn't make, yeah, okay, there's no legal recourse for them. They're breaking the law in doing so. So the effect is the same though. You're still worried all the time. Although I will say this, I think people being blacklisted now don't have to worry quite so much in the future, because it's like with the Memogate thing. This dude gets fired from Google. All of a sudden, WikiLeaks and Gab both offer him jobs. There are firms now rising up that will take you in if you've been mistreated. I would be more worried about somebody who's like they get outcast. They're part of the left. Like even somebody like yourself, you're more on the left on many issues, but you don't toe the social justice warrior line. If they come for you and start blacklisting you and harassing you and making your life living hell, you're not part of that right-wing group that has already steeled itself against censorship. It almost might be worse for people who are sane leftists than it would be for people on the right.
Yeah, you know, I mean, they've already come for me in a sense. I mean, Joan Walsh of Salon actually told Salon not to publish me anymore, but then I was published in other places, so it really didn't affect me too much. And I, you know, people wrote, Daily Beast wrote a hit piece on me.
Well, they can't even pay their rent. You don't want to be on board with someone. They won't exist much longer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the interesting thing about what you just stated in terms of censorship and left and right, when do you think social media will be a tool to actually have a normal discussion as opposed to you're Satan, I hate you, you said this, and I'm going to forget about the fact that a lot of my policy positions, you know, paint me as a hypocrite. I don't see how Twitter, I think people live on Twitter too. They think Twitter is reality, and they think fighting for social causes or their value system on Twitter gives them some kind of rank or some kind of prestige or street cred. When do you think that kind of mentality will begin to dissipate from American culture? People say, like, I always found it fascinating. Oh, did you see what Trump tweeted? Well, who cares what he tweeted? It's, well, you know, how did he become president? If you're on the left and you don't like Trump, why don't you focus on that, not so much what he tweeted? Why do you think Twitter is so powerful in terms of social discourse and our, you know, the groupthink out there? Why is Twitter so powerful, and why is social media like not a tool for communication, more of a tool for this free-for-all argument, you know, scenario?
Well, I think that's a little bit of a misunderstanding of maybe U.S. history, because things have always pretty much been like that. You go back to like the mid-1800s, and people devolved into drunken mobs and beat each other on a regular basis over the issue of Irish immigrants. So I actually think it's more civil now, even despite the fact that everyone is Hitler, everyone is a commie, everyone's Satan. It's still more civil than it was in the past when people were beating each other with fireplace tongs over some tax or whether there'd be segregation or not. I don't even feel negatively towards the free-for-all and chaos online. Actually, I like it. I enjoy it. I was a troll years ago who wasn't even interested in political or any other form of intelligent, rational discourse. I saw the internet as a way to get off on harassing people at the time. This is, you know, more than a decade ago. I was in elementary school and going on to chat rooms and laughing and posting random swear words, and I had a great time doing it. Things are more civil now. But no, it's never going to be used for rational discussion. The point is, though, they should be able to be irrational. People should have the right to spout off. And I mean, if it's criminal harassment, if you've been blocked by somebody, you keep making account after account, just harassing them endlessly, that's different. That's already criminal, though. You don't need additional censorship to deal with that. You just have to recognize it's harassment. Somebody's posting credible threats. Somebody's defaming another person in a criminal manner. Okay, they're already illegal. Why do we need more censorship for just stuff that people find offensive? That's totally arbitrary. I can find anything offensive. I can find the WikiLeaks poster behind you offensive. You can find the Roman flag offensive. It doesn't mean that there's even any it's not legitimate necessarily. And it doesn't mean that there was any ill intent anyway. Sometimes it's like that. Remember the NASA dude there? Can't remember his name. He had that anime shirt on. And he's like, oh, yeah, we're putting these probes up and all very scientific. You know, I can't remember which lander it was. I think it was the Ceres lander there. And the people like Sarkeesian, all of the third wave feminists came out and said, oh, his shirt is sexist. He should apologize. The dude's breaking down in tears. Here you've got a PhD working for NASA, All he's talking about is, hey, we landed on an asteroid or whatever the hell it have to be. We sent a probe out to Pluto. He's brought to tears because he wore the wrong shirt. What are people, what are they smoking when they're getting that offended over that issue? It doesn't make sense. And then these same people come out with a shirt that says kill all men. And nobody's supposed to say anything about it. They're not supposed to be offended. It's a double standard. There are people who don't even think it is.
It's absolutely insane. Actually, Tim Black had a great, amazing segment on when Carrie Fisher died. Steve Martin wrote a tweet, and his tweet was, Carrie Fisher was the most beautiful, intelligent, something to the effect, the most beautiful, intelligent woman that I've ever met, something to that effect. And then people on Twitter said, how dare you call her beautiful, you sexist bastard. Why would you call her beautiful? You're Satan and you're Hitler and Stalin all wrapped up into one. We hate you.
Yeah, they would have gotten less offended if he had talked about her coke nail.
Yeah, exactly. It makes no sense. Where do you think this goes to? Where does this progress in terms of censorship? They're kind of getting away with hurting certain YouTubers or certain media personalities. What is the next evolution of what they try to get away with? So we know that certain political discourse is viewed as offensive. Okay, they're going to demonetize that. Where do you think that they might try to either demonetize or hurt financially or censor? What's the next evolution? Would it be even a broader view of political discourse to only fit the pure neoliberal line, or like I mentioned earlier, maybe music or poetry, or cinema? What's the next level of censorship that you see?
Well, if they go after music, they'll destroy themselves faster, so I hope they do. They'll make really good music. It'll be just like the 80s. It'll be like a world of synthesizers. That's like heaven to me. So I hope that they do go after music real quick, especially rock. Bring back the Coke rock of the 80s. I would say they're going to keep increasing the monetary side. One thing is Google is, again, a for-profit company. Now, YouTube hemorrhages money. It never made money. It never will probably make money. So they don't care how much they abuse people with AdSense. But the thing is, people are weaning themselves off that if they're smart anyway and taking crowdfunding now. Or they're selling merchandise. Or they're doing something else. Like most of my income comes from selling books. It has to do with self-publishing. It doesn't even have anything to do with YouTube. So I feel slightly insulated from the fallout from anything monetary on YouTube. Some people aren't so lucky. They became dependent on AdSense, and they're going to get screwed. As far as general censorship goes, though, the one optimistic thing I would say is that there's been a massive reaction, including from people who don't talk about politics, over an issue that isn't even involving, hey, we're going to ban you for wrongthink, but simply their watered down limited state stuff. Now, having an AI put you in a limited state for being offensive is a terrible idea. It won't remove the material, so it'll probably spread it further. When Google realizes this fact, they may rescind it entirely. They did this with restricted mode, and I hope they do. And another thing is it gives some of us the opportunity to say, hey, we don't hate YouTube. We love YouTube and want to see it succeed. That's why we're arguing against it, because it's a bad idea. I'm totally addicted to YouTube. It's in November. It'll be 10 years that I've been on YouTube. Wow. I wouldn't have spent that much time on the platform, building as much of a presence as I have, spending countless hundreds of hours making videos if I didn't enjoy the site. So when Google comes along and decides, hey, we're going to make the platform make less money, it's gonna lose even more. It's going to have less content, less intelligent content, and we're probably going to piss a lot of people that use it off. Maybe they flee elsewhere. It's like, well, why are you doing that? It doesn't make any sense. It's obvious Google wants to preserve YouTube, or it would have unloaded it long ago for being fiscally insolvent. So I'm not even sure exactly. I guess that they're bowing before ad pressure. What's the point, though? If you demonetize all the content, you're never going to make that money.
In terms of life after Twitter or Facebook or YouTube, where do you see the next evolution of social media? And do you think that would be that evolution is a byproduct of the censorship? And do you think the censorship in some form will then accompany that next evolution or level?
Yeah. People like interconnected content. That's why YouTube became so popular. It's you host video. It's one of the main mediums in which humans understand the world. So you got the basic stuff. You've got text, stuff you're reading, pictures that you're looking at. Maybe they have a message in them, like a meme. You've got music, audio, and then you've got video. And those are the basic mediums that are generally used online, and every computer format always have been. Probably for some, unless we have 3D like holographic content, probably always will be. There will always be a place for video hosting online, especially as it hopefully becomes more efficient to do so, to serve that massive amount of bandwidth. There will always be a place for literature and for blog posts and writing and stuff. The basic formulaic stuff will remain the same. That's why Twitter does so well, because it's very short, spurts of text. It's fairly efficient. I don't see any of these big firms, other than maybe Facebook, collapsing outright. What I do see is that they're going to put pressure on their user bases. The user bases will react. If the tech firm doesn't back off censorship, especially as this moral panic winds down, people will use other sites. Gab would become the new Twitter. VidMe or BitChute or Vimeo or something would become the next YouTube. Google would get displaced by Bing, or Yahoo's search feature or start page taking off of Google, or Ecosia or something. And so on down the line. Facebook would fall, Minds would rise up. And it's happened before. MySpace at first had a really good model. It was really great, and a lot of people used it. It was way bigger than Facebook. They collapsed. Facebook became dominant and now is one of the major players. They could collapse too. It's not beyond the realm of possibility, but the basic format, I think, of having a user account to gratify the person, so they're getting ratings or stars or upvotes, whatever it happens to be. It's just, it takes advantage. It almost hijacks the human's competitive urges within their mind. Because we're no longer competing like as much for food and stuff like that. We compete online primarily for people's attention. I hope that YouTube especially continues to exist, because I like using it. I've already got a huge presence here. If not, though, I'll be elsewhere. You'll be elsewhere. Everybody will be. Nobody's going to stop talking just because Google decides to make its platform unusable. It would just be an inconvenience, I'd say.
I guess last couple questions. I really appreciate you, being on my channel and having this discussion. In terms of being offended by statements, there was, in addition to the litany of racist things that Hillary Clinton has stated throughout her life, from calling black youth super predators to you talk about structural racism, taking prison lobbyist donations in 2015. But there was it's on YouTube, and after this, people can go ahead. I might put it in the description section. It is a joke that Hillary Clinton made regarding Mahatma Gandhi. And she was speaking to an audience, and this is on YouTube. You can just type in a Hillary Clinton Mahatma Gandhi joke. And she basically tried to say that he owned a gas station. So that was the whole joke that and so today that is, it is a racist joke, but today, that if somebody else said that, not only could they not become Democratic nominee, but their life would be destroyed on social media. Why do you think that people, especially on the left, unfortunately, why do you think people are just okay? They're just fine with Hillary Clinton making a racist joke, and then actually voting for her, and then actually saying, let's forget about all her racism. We have to defeat Trump, who's a real racist, even though they both, Hillary and Bill went to his wedding, and they've been friends for decades. What is this cognitive dissonance where people are offended and want censorship on certain things, but for other things that actually would prove them to be hypocrites, they don't want censorship? Where does that? Why is Google getting away with that type of thing, or why? Yeah. Why are people allowed to get away with that in our society?
It's the dumbing down of people's minds by the two-party mentality. The legacy media certainly helps with this, trying to fixate people on party or some other issue as opposed to what you're discussing now. Hillary Clinton, though, she said plenty of weird off-color things just during this last election. Like she goes on the primarily black radio show there. I can't remember the name of it. Oh, I carry hot sauce around in my pocketbook. It's like you expected her to smear her face with pancake batter and start doing a minstrel show or something. And people didn't even talk about it. You never heard about it from Salon. If you heard about it at all from the average media outlet, they said, oh, it was a bit insensitive, it was off color, but she's harmless. We know she's not racist because she's got a D after her name. And Trump, meanwhile, I'm scratching my head to think about significantly bigoted things he actually said, other than people's opinion about what he said regarding deportation or something. But I correctly predicted he wasn't going to mass deport people. That's the alt-right backed off its support of Trump on this token. They were thinking, oh, he's going to send the Gestapo around to get rid of every illegal in the country. Now we find out, no, that's not the case. He's focusing on certain classes of illegal immigrants. And those same people that loved Trump at the time because they thought he was like head Nazi, now they hate him. And people on the left, they still hate him too. It's weird.
Well, that's the thing, with Clinton, she said, oh, well, I voted for a border fence.
Yeah.
So it all comes back to this hypocrisy. But I want to just, I guess people are enjoying the discussion. I want to keep going, but I know we have a time limit. So I guess the last question is, what do you see in terms of people talk about the deep state and censorship? What do you think? Because we know that Amazon owns the Washington Post, and Jeff Bezos had a contract with the CIA, and then you get this kind of neoliberal groupthink filtering down from one of the biggest publications in the world and in the country, from the Washington Post to CNN, and then it filters down to the Young Turks on YouTube. So it's like you can't wiggle out of it. It's all this kind of groupthink, but then a lot of it is tied to the quote unquote deep state. And these spy agencies that have zero evidence of Russia hacking anything. In fact, we learned from Disobedient Media and Elizabeth Voss, a really wonderful journalist, and the Forensicator and Adam Carter, who are cyber analysts, that the Guccifer files could never have been hacked. They were certainly copied, almost certainly copied locally. And then we have James Clapper stating there's no direct evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. We have Dianne Feinstein stating that she has no evidence. Maxine Waters stating she has no evidence. James Comey, Jay Johnson stating that, yeah, the DNC would never give its computer servers to the FBI or anyone in the U.S. government. We're sanctioning Russia based on CrowdStrike, a third-party tech firm. Now you have the Awans, Imran Awan, getting arrested, and he was storing data on off-site servers, while Hillary Clinton was storing top secret information on Platte River and Dado before they could be retroactively classified. All of these scandals taking place, and then you have media influenced by the same spy agencies that are continuing to lie. What correlation do you see between the deep state and censorship?
They're all for it, but at the same time, they're not the main ones, I think, pushing it. A lot of it has to do with profit, profit motive. I think the reason why the legacy media wants censorship, and they're like the big kahunas of pushing it right now, the reason why they want it is quite simple. If they're on TV or on radio or something, they're governed by the FCC. They're regulated in what they can and cannot say. They can't say the F word. They can't dive off the deep end into a blazing rant about how much of an idiot some politician is. They have to be very careful with their word use. They have to wear the $1,000 tux, and they also have high overhead because they need the studios and the printing and stuff. On the internet, you don't need that. Some random person with a webcam sitting in front of their laptop can go viral, reach 10 million people. So it's much, much more efficient, and it's less censored. They're hoping to bring the internet to the same level of censorship that they experience so that they can enter the online world. And then all of a sudden their efficiency is higher than all of their competitors. They've already got the capital to throw at the situation. Right now they're fighting with both hands tied behind their back. They're the ones that are censored because they're under those sort of regulatory systems. Rather than tell the government, hey, well, why don't we just deregulate? Like people are mature enough now as a society. Let's just deregulate like newsprint and radio and cable and just have a free-for-all. That's what they could do. Instead of doing that, they want to make everyone else equally as miserable as they are. And they are miserable. They wish that they could go on TV every day and drop the F-bomb. They wish that they could go on TV and chant racial slurs. They wish they could be on TV and say, oh, yeah, violence is pretty cool, or, you know, stuff like that. They wish they could because, you know, it'd be funny and exciting. They do it in their private lives anyway. Don't let them kid you. But they can't. And so they feel sad about this fact. And as far as the government wanting censorship, it's self-explanatory. They're afraid that some fringe left or right will pop up and supplant like the neoliberals and the neocons, like the John McCains. They're basically the same thing.
When you hear that this phrase, Putin's puppet or a Russian mouthpiece, which, like I said, Counterpunch, a publication that I read, was falsely accused of that and then tries to attack a progressive writer, and now is also being censored now. Do you think, I mean, censorship comes in different forms. What is this fascination with disgruntled Clinton voters and the establishment with Russia and being called a Russian spy or comrade? I think that I guess to me that's just another way of censoring people, a kind of vapid form of censorship. What do you think? How could we have in our society delved back into 1950s McCarthyism? How did that happen? And what's that link to censorship?
I think that it's part of a snowballing lie. My own feeling is the DNC emails were leaked by an insider. It had nothing to do with Russian hacking. To cover their asses, they had to blame Russian hackers because WikiLeaks were the ones sending it out. Now, nobody ever said before, oh, they're controlled by the Russian state. They loved WikiLeaks during the Bush administration when they're saying, hey, W is committing war crimes. W is doing terrible, terrible things. They're like, oh, praise WikiLeaks. We want a transparent government. All of a sudden, they hated them when Obama took office. Now, here's the thing. DNC emails get leaked. They show Podesta's corrupt. Parts of the media are in cahoots with the DNC. The media goes into meltdown mode. They're like, well, we're going to get exposed as doing like political favors with the DNC. It's going to crush them. It's going to crush us. We're screwed. What are we supposed to do? They say, oh, we'll just blame Russian hackers. Then people won't look at what's in the emails unless they're on the right. We'll turn it into a partisan issue. At first, it was just they were trying to turn it into a left-right thing, you know, basically business as normal. Then they got it in their head, oh, all of our problems are the result of Russia. Anytime there's a leak, anytime there's investigative journalism going on, hell, even if it involves some of the Republicans, we'll offer them a deal. We'll shield them from scandal fallout, the John McCain stuff, if they'll oppose Trump and go hard against Russia. Because I think that's honestly what they're doing. They're hoping to control the government by default, by getting most of the Democrats and some of the Republicans together under one umbrella. I wouldn't be surprised if it involves blackmail. Basically, toe the line, go along with the Russia line. Otherwise, your stuff might get leaked, and we won't defend you, and we won't blame Russian hackers for that one. We'll say, oh, yeah, what wonderful transparency we're having. We found out that this senator was having an affair. That congresswoman over there was talking to Hezbollah leadership or something. I wouldn't be surprised if that's what's happening. I mean, DC smells to high hell. It's obviously corrupt. We've known that for a long time. That doesn't even have anything to do with the modern DNC. It's just always been that way for the last 100 years.
Absolutely. And my thing is, when I happen to think that if it's an establishment Democrat, which I just had an interview with Jared Beck, a DNC lawsuit attorney who is risking his life battling the DNC, and really a great a human being, very courageous, and he's going up against Debbie Wasserman Schultz because she cheated Bernie Sanders voters of hundreds of millions of dollars. And what Jared Beck stated was that the DNC is going to cheat again 100%. Now, I believe that once they cheat for the establishment candidate, whomever it might be, they will lose to Trump. So I know that you called it a long time, way before. I mean, you were so right in the 538s and the New York Times, where they were all wrong. I mean, and you were right, and I'm calling it now. I think that Trump is going to win again, especially if it's an establishment Democrat. He'll win again. Now, what I think will take place is that there's going to be a reshuffling or somewhat of a paradigm shift. I was expecting something to take place, but Democrats actually dug into the ground and just continued everything that led them to lose with even more fervor, 100%, 1,000% more enthusiasm. I think in 2020, Democrats will lose again, Trump will win, and because it's going to be an establishment Democrat, what takes place in terms of the media groupthink? Because they can't blame Russia, so are they going to blame China or North Korea? Or what takes place in terms of, because the media is saying, listen to us still, we have egg on our face with 2016, but we're still right, and here are the reasons why we were wrong. But if they're wrong again in 2020, what takes place in terms of the reshuffling?
I think you're probably right. It doesn't look like the Democrats are under enough stress right now for a party overhaul, which means that some sort of neoliberal will be the candidate, probably. They'll probably choose somebody on the vaguely younger side, somebody who appears slightly like an outsider. They'll try to compromise. They'll try to get the progressives aboard. I don't think it'll work. When that happens, the DNC goes into a full meltdown. They won't get another Tom Perez. They won't have another Debbie Wasserman Schultz. The outsiders will take command of the party by force because a lot of the neoliberals, to save their own necks, will join up with them. They'll begin to flee, I think, the DNC's core of power. Trump will probably win again. Depending on what happens during the midterms, though, we have to look at those first. If the Republicans do as well as they're probably going to do, which is they maintain the House and Senate, they might gain a couple Senate seats, that might put enough pressure on the Democrats to reform. But then again, they've got several directions they can reform into. They can go down the Sanders route, the more socialist side, or the dedicated wedge progressive sort of Warren route, or they can go like the Jim Webb sort of business Democrat route. Regardless, though, they're all going to be nervous. They have to pick and choose what groups to wine and dine, what wedge issues and fiscal platforms to use. Right now, they don't even have a platform. We've got a new deal for the American people, trying to echo FDR. What's the deal?
Russia.
We're going to create a lot of, yeah.
The deal is Russia.
Yeah, we're going to create a lot of jobs and everything will be great. Okay, well, how do you intend to do that? Oh, we're just going to do it. Just trust us. That's not they tried that during the last general. It didn't work. And if insulting Trump and calling him crazy or something, if that worked, he never would have won to begin with.
Exactly. Well, Styx, this has been fascinating. I really thank you for showing up, and it's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. It was a great talk.
Yeah, I was glad to be on. It's fun talking.
Thanks, Styx. Thank you so much.
You have a good day.
Thank you.